Well, good morning. I ask you to open up your Bibles to 1 Samuel, the 9th chapter. 1 Samuel, the 9th chapter is where we're going to begin in just a minute. We do have some that are visiting with us. We are very thankful that you are here. This past quarter, and it's ending this week, we've been talking about Saul. And Saul is a fascinating study for a number of reasons. And it's interesting how the scriptures will talk of him and the opportunity or the lessons that we have to learn from him. And so in 1 Samuel, the 9th chapter, we're introduced to how Saul is going to be called and how he's going to be the first king outside of obviously God. But it's interesting his perspective of it. In 1 Samuel, the 10th chapter is the verse that is up there, which we'll get into in just a minute. It says that he was hiding in the baggage. They were about to make him king. They were telling everybody it was a public situation. We're going to announce the king, and they look around for the king, and there's no king. He's hiding in the baggage. And when you think about that from an application standpoint, it's interesting how often we fall into that same situation, hiding behind our baggage, hiding behind the things that we allow ourselves to get in our way, to stop us. And they're going to be different for different people. There's going to be certain things that are very difficult to get past, including your past and the things that you went through in your past. Sometimes, as the case with Saul, it was his perspective of himself and whether or not he really wanted to be king. To some degree, as you go forward with Saul, you see his selfishness, obviously. But Saul, to me, is one of those guys that you see the difference between understanding what true humility is. Humility is the understanding of who I am. I am still worthy because I am a child of God, but I'm going to think about other people first. There's other people who view humility as I'm going to put myself down. I'm going to view myself down below where I need to be. And that's good, per se, until you get power. And now all of a sudden you can make decisions, as Saul did or tried to, and some of them didn't turn out to be too good. When it comes to you and it comes to me, what baggage are we caught up in? In 1 Samuel, the 9th chapter, in verse 21, it's pretty clear after he is called that this is exactly how he thought of himself. And you know what? He's right. He's right. Saul replied to talking of Samuel, "Am I not a Benjaminite? Of the smallest of the tribes of Israel, my family, the least of all the families of the tribe of Benjamin? Why then have you spoke to me in this way?" He's right. He was from a small tribe. There's no question about that. Whether he's from a small family is a different conversation. We understand if you read this, as we study this, that he was very wealthy. His family was very wealthy. Matter of fact, 1 Samuel, the 9th chapter, verses 1 and 2, talks about his dad being a valiant man. Kish, his dad, was a valiant man. And so his perspective of why are you talking to me this way is understandable to some degree. This reminds me so much of John the 5th chapter, verses 1 through 5, where you have the man at the pool, and Jesus comes up to him and says, "Do you want to get well?" And he says, I can't. Keep your finger here. We'll go over to John the 5th chapter for just a minute, because I think this is an important piece. In John the 5th chapter, Jesus is given the opportunity to this man to heal him. He's at the pool of Bethesda, and the pool of Bethesda at the time was viewed that if they got the first person into the water after the water was stirred by an angel, that person would be healed. And so you imagine all these people that were sitting around. It says in verse 3, there was a multitude of those that were sick, blind, limping, or paralyzed. They were all sitting around waiting for that water to be stirred. And then the hope was you had somebody that could take you into it, that you could beat everybody else into the water. And you imagine the difficulty that comes with that. And this man, it says, was ill. We're not exactly sure what he had, but he had been ill for 38 years, it says. 38 years. And he had nobody to put him into the pool. And so Jesus says to him in verse 6, "Do you want to get well?" Now, that can be taken in various ways. He's just simply asking him, "Do you want to get well?" But also the reality is not everybody wants to get well. This is how he was known for 38 years. 38 years. He was defined now as a man that was sitting next to this pool. Does he want to get well? We read it and say, sure, of course he does. But there was reasons why he couldn't, wasn't there? He goes on and he talks about the circumstances that he found himself in. I can't. In verse 7, the sick man answered him, Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I'm coming, another steps down before me. He has reasons. I've tried to get into the pool. I just have nobody to get me there. My circumstances are keeping me from getting into the pool. And you know what? He's right. He's right. The problem is, these are great reasons unless you're talking to Jesus Christ. Unless you're talking to God. Now all of a sudden, those reasons, those excuses that we have are nothing. They're nothing. This man is told to get up and walk, and that's exactly what he does. Do you think he continued to view himself as the man sitting by the pool? Probably not. You know how many people do that spiritually, though? I'm still struggling with that. I'm still stuck in my past. The past is an amazing tool. It's an amazing tool for us to learn from our own past and the past of others. It's an amazing tool for us to teach other people about it. It is not good to live in. It's not good to live in. And people live in it. People are defined by it. As you know, one of my favorite phrases is the good old days. If you're visiting, I hate that phrase. The good old days. Oh, the good old days. The good old days was when for you? When? For me, it was when Bill Clinton was president. And I've talked about this before. Why? Not because it was Bill Clinton. I don't care who was president. I didn't have any responsibilities. My parents paid for everything. I just went to school, played sports, came home smiling. That's it. The good old days. For some of you, it's a long time before that. And in some cases, your good old days were bad days for other people. Good old days. We get so caught up in various things that we went through, our perspective, our life, and we forget that not everybody had the same thing. So this man for 38 years was sitting at this pool, going through horrible things. Just wanting, at least is the way it's worded, the wanting him to get into the water. I just want to get into the water. And the one who is able to heal him comes up to him. We're not told whether or not this is the first man Jesus said to, do you want to get well? Perhaps there were other people who said, do you want to get well? And the answer was no. No, I don't want to get well. This is who I am. Because you know what's going to change in this man's life now? In verse 7, in verse 8? He can walk. He's healthy. But the way that he made money, the way that his life was, all of a sudden is absolutely changed. It is absolutely changed. And perhaps that's a good thing, and I think it's a good thing. But when you're emotionally caught up and being defined by the things that you go through, that's a hard thing. And there are people here that struggle with this. And the danger so often is we are so spiritually blind to it. We don't see it. And what we are the people by the pool of Bethesda when God is saying, do you want to get well? And we say, no, I don't. We hide behind the baggage. We still view ourselves to be so small and insignificant. We need to learn from the past, but we also need to understand who we are. If you want to, you can find reasons not to change. Over in 1 John, the 4th chapter, if you turn over there with me. 1 John, the 4th chapter, is something that is so powerful to me, so much so that Tyler and I named a podcast after this, You Are From God. The understanding of that definition of who I am, and understanding who I am. When God calls you, when we are His children, that changes our definition of who we are, or it should. I am a child of the living God. You are a child of the living God. That's who we are. And that changes a lot of things. But if you want to live and find reasons and justify the things that you can't change because you've chosen not to change them, that's your choice. That's my choice. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden there aren't physical things or difficulties that we're not going to continue to go through. Of course we are. Of course. Doesn't mean that there's not things that you need medical help with. Of course. What I'm suggesting, though, is when you close the door and say that God cannot help me with this situation, you're in trouble. God absolutely can help you. And some of those answers are the providence of medicine or other people. But we need to understand we cannot close the door to what God is able to do. Christians are great at this. We'll talk about to other people. Do not put God in a box. Do not put God in a box, and guess what we put him in? A box. He's be able to do beyond all that we comprehend or imagine, except for, my imagination. I have a good one. No, it's beyond all your comprehension. He's able to do beyond you. He's able to do beyond me. And we are so quick to put him in a box. In verse 4, he says, "You are from God, little children, and have overcome them, because greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. They are from the world because they speak as from the world, and the world listens to them. We are from God. The one who knows God listens to us, and the one who is not from God does not listen to us. By this we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of error." You are from God. If you haven't thought about that, I encourage you to wake up every day thinking about that. Make yourself think about that. You are from God. And the one that is in you is greater than the one in the world. Greater than the one in the world. This is the same book that we'll talk about earlier on in 1 John. That people so much focus on the darkness that is passing rather than the eternal light. Focus on the light. Focus on God. Focus on what he is able to do. Going back to 1 Samuel. Saul, however, struggled with this, obviously. He's hiding in the baggage in 1 Samuel, the 2nd chapter. In verse 22, it says, "Therefore they inquired further of the Lord, 'Has the man come here yet?' And the Lord said, 'Behold, he is hiding himself among the baggage.'" God tells him he's hiding himself among the baggage. I want you to notice verse 24 here. "Samuel said to all the people, 'Do you see him whom the Lord has chosen? Surely there is no one like him among all the people.' So the people shouted and said, 'Long live the king.'" Here's the king. They view him as the king. In 1 Samuel, the 9th chapter, in the beginning, it talks about not only is his dad valiant warrior or valiant man, he was as handsome of a man as there was, it says. He was taller than anybody else. This is the king. He's standing right there in front of them. And how does he view himself, or where is he? He's hiding in the baggage. Hiding in the baggage. Do you understand how worthy you are? Saul didn't view himself this way. You are worthy because God called you to be. He's qualified you to be. In Colossians, the 1st chapter, will say. He qualified you. You're worthy because he says you're worthy. You're his child. Self-worth is something that I think we combat so much. And I don't think this is new, but this is certainly something that you see on a day-to-day basis. Talked about this a couple weeks ago. I don't know if it was 9 or 11. But it's the idea, when you watch television, all you're ever told is that you can be better. Use this product. You'll be better. You're not good enough. You need to be better. God says, you're good enough. You're my child. That doesn't mean you don't keep growing. But you're a child of the living God. You can't get better than that. By definition, you are a child of the King. You are chosen. Our self-worth is not found in what you and I have done. Other than the fact, is over in Colossians, the 1st chapter, if you turn over there with me, it talks about what we used to be. We were rescued. We were transferred. We were studying this on Thursdays, and it's just such a powerful passage. Verse 12 is where it talks about us being qualified by him. But then it gets into verse 15 and following here, and it describes Jesus. It describes him. Why am I worthy? Because the creator of all things was willing to come here. The one that all things was created by. The one that is head of the church. The one that is all powerful, above all authorities, was willing to die for you and for me. In verse 20 he says, and through him to reconcile all things to himself, whether things on earth or things in heaven, having made peace through the blood of his cross. He was willing to die for you. The opportunity that you and I have for peace is found in the death of Jesus Christ. You are worthy of that death. That doesn't mean you've earned it. You're worthy because he says you are. You know how much time we waste trying to figure that out? You don't even have to think about it. It's a fact. He says it. You are worthy because he says you are worthy. That's the struggle sometimes, though. Getting to the point that we are able to feel that. It goes on in verse 21 and 22 and talks about us being alienated and hostile in attitude, engaged in evil spirits. Yet he has reconciled you in the body of flesh through death in order to present you before him holy and blameless and beyond reproach. Now, that's what we have been called to be. He makes us those things. He makes us holy. He makes us above reproach. He makes us those things. And then verse 23, the small word that we always stumble across, if you are obedient, if you do what he says, and if you believe that to be true, if you believe that he has made you worthy. Saul had a choice to make. He had a choice. He could follow God and live up to what he was called to be, the king, just like David does. Doesn't mean he's going to be perfect, obviously, but he chooses not to. What I want you to understand for us is that God views us to be worthy, and he knows your past. He knows your past. He knows what you've done. He knows what you've thought or thinking. And he still says you're worthy. Think about that. The things that we would say God would never forgive me if he knew. He does know. He knows. Oh, the people would look so differently towards me if they found out anything that I've ever done. No. It might say more about you and your judging. But it certainly isn't God. God was willing to send his son to die for you even though he knew what you were going to do. He knew. He knows. And he still says you're worthy. In my life of preaching, one of the things that's come very, very clear to me is the hardest person absolutely to forgive is self. We are willing to allow other people to forgive us. We're willing to forgive other people many times before ourselves. It is okay. It is okay that you have sinned. It's okay. Because I've sinned. Because we've all sinned. And God says, I know you've sinned. I know you're going to sin. That's why I sent my son. Live for him. I want you to be my child. I want you to be mine. There is nobody in this world, and I love this thought, there is no one in this world that wants you to be in heaven more than him. No one. Not your family, not your spouse, not your children, not your parents. God wants you to be with him so much, he paid all. Please understand your worth. Please understand your value. And please understand that you are not alone in the things that you are struggling with, the things that you are going through in this life. One of the amazing things, going back to 1 Samuel, the 10th chapter, is where they find him. He's hiding, as we talked about in 1 Samuel, the 10th chapter. And we'll pick up in verse 23 is where we just read. Verse 24, he'll continue on and talk about this. It says, Samuel said to the people, verse 23. So they ran and took him from there, and when he was stood among the people, he was taller than any of the people from his shoulders upward. You know what? There are sometimes you just need help getting away from your baggage. There's times you have to help. There's times that you need help. There's times that you need help. And the people were willing not to laugh and point at Saul. He's the chosen. He's the king. So they go and get him. They run and get him. I want you to understand, when you're going through difficulties in this life, my job is to view you still as a child of the King. You are my family. You are in God's family. What's my job? I'm to run and help you. But the opposite is true as well. You need to allow me to help you. Am I willing to allow people to help me? See, we're willing to allow God to help us many times. Over in Philippians, the 4th chapter, the Apostle Paul talks of this, and these are verses, again, that we talk about often. And there's a reason for it. These are the verses in 2019, 2020, and I got a feeling probably in 2021 is the most searched verses in the Bible. And there's a reason for it. It's not only because people forget where they are, but it's because it's needed. Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. Let your gentle spirit be known to all people. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and pleading with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God which surpasses all comprehension will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. God obviously is there to help. I'm afraid so often that we walk into a church building, we look the part, and you all look very nice. And we look around and we think we're the only ones that are struggling. We put on our suits, dresses, whatever the case may be, and we just come in and we're smiling under masks. And we sing. And the whole time we know full well that there's things that we are struggling with. And we think we're the only ones. And that is Satan doing an excellent job of making you think you're alone. Everyone here is struggling with something. Everyone. You know how I know that? Because we're all tempted. We're all going through things in this life. There's things that we go through. There's trials. And there's the other reason is the fact that Satan doesn't want you to be with God. There's things you're going to be going through. But then we come to services and we sit down and we sing songs of praises to God and we talk to Him and we read His Word. And sometimes we even try to fool Him. I'm fine. This is such a small, insignificant thing that I'm going through that is too small for God. As I've said many times, and I want you to understand this, and it took me a long time to understand this, everything we go through in this life is small compared to God. It's God. He can do all things. That doesn't mean He doesn't care. That doesn't mean He doesn't want your burdens. What it does mean is that He can take your burdens. Let Him take them. And if you're like me in the struggle that I have, He actually doesn't need your help in lifting them. If you give Him your burdens, let Him take the burden. That doesn't mean that there's not things for you to deal with, but let Him take it. And what do you get? The peace of God that surpasses all comprehension. We have to be willing to allow Him to do those things. And for us, we need to be willing to allow others in. Galatians, the 6th chapter, talks about that. We need to bear one another's burdens. But brethren, I cannot help or bear your burdens if I don't know that you have burdens to bear. I can know from a 36,000 foot view kind of a deal that everybody has burdens. I don't know specifically what yours are, and I don't need to know. Scott, please pray for me. Absolutely. God knows them. Perfect. I'm happy to. I always do. And I pray that you guys do for one another. But there are times that we need more than that. And pride stops us from asking. Pride stops us from talking to people that can actually help you. It is amazing how often there are people in congregations that are going through something, and if you say something to somebody else, they know someone who's gone through very similar things, and I can help you connect to them, and they can help you through those things. But I don't know what our perspective is, that people are going to judge us so much, and the next thing we're going to be in a parking lot being stoned. I don't know what we think is going to happen. It's not a walk of shame to come up to the front and ask for prayers. We all should be in the front row. 6 feet apart, socially distanced, all that good stuff. But we all should be here. We understand that we're all struggling with things. But we're here to help one another. And if people judge you based on those things, that's their issue. That's their issue. And God will judge them for that. And we can help them with that. Our responsibility is to help one another carry these burdens. It doesn't mean we don't have a part to play in it. In verse 5, for each one, in Galatians the 6th chapter, for each one will bear his own load. There's no question we have a responsibility in it, but we don't have to carry it by ourselves. We can help one another, and there's no question that God can help. But we need to be willing to come out from among the baggage. We need to be willing to stop hiding behind the things that we've gone through in this life. And I'm telling you, I know, I'm not trying to make them insignificant things that people have gone through. I know people have gone through horrific things in this life. There's no question about that, and it'll continue to happen. What I'm telling you is, God is the Almighty King. And He's the all-powerful. And He is the all-loving. And He is able to help you through whatever you've gone through. We've got to be willing to give it to Him, though. We've got to be willing to lean on one another, and certainly, and most importantly, to lean on God. I encourage you today to think about the things that you've allowed to keep you from being the person that you've been called to be. There are people that will not obey the gospel because they think that they need to get better before they obey the gospel. If Jesus Christ is the one that can make you better and make you whole, where are you going to go? He's the one that'll make you whole. He's the one that'll help you through all things. If you've sinned, you're looking at a group of sinners. We all have. We've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And He knows that you have. And He knows that I have. And He says, the free gift that I give you, eternal life. I love you so much that while you were helpless, while you were my enemy, I was willing to send my Son to die for you. Because I want to be with you for eternity. It's your choice. I encourage you to understand your worth today. And make sure that your relationship with God is what it needs to be, what it should be. He wants you so badly. I cannot even put into words what that looks like. The interesting thing when we're talking about Saul and we're talking about God in 1 Samuel is that God wanted to be their king, and He was their king, and the people left Him, and they wanted their own king. And we can read these stories and say, how could people ever do that? And we do the exact same thing. I encourage you not to do that today. Make sure God is your king. Make sure that you're serving Him. But if you do not have a relationship with Him, now's the time. Let us help you. If you have questions, ask. Our goal is to get to heaven. And if we can all be in heaven together, worshiping our Lord and our God, taking eternity to get past the fact that we're standing before Him, that's what this is all about. If we can help you with anything, do not leave. If it's right now, I ask you to please come as we stand and sing.